Good morning, everybody. I'm Captain Donovan Sims, PIO for the Louisville Fire Department. I'd like to thank you all for being here this morning. If you can just get yourself in position, and our tribute will begin shortly.
Engine 12 is in service.
Engine 12 in service at 10:20.
Engine box on the air.
Engine 5 on the air at 10:20.
Engine 12 is in quarters.
Engine 12 in quarters, 10:23.
Attention all companies, assemble for the September 11th tribute. Attention all companies, assemble for the September 11th tribute at 10:24. Attention all units, attention all units. Today we lower our flags to half-staff and pause for a moment of silence to honor the memory of fallen firefighters and first responders who made the ultimate sacrifice responding to the World Trade Center on September 11, 2001. We recall their courage, compassion, and dedication to duty as they willingly advanced toward danger rather than retreat. We also honor the memory of our fallen brother and sister firefighters, police officers, emergency medical personnel, and service men and women who have given their lives before and since that day protecting others. Today, we recognize you and we thank you. Your legacy and the standard you established is our greatest inheritance. We will never forget. Attention all companies. Attention all companies. This concludes the September 11th tribute. Attention all companies. This concludes the September 11th tribute at 10:30.
Engine 23 is in service.
Engine 23 in service at 10:31.
Good morning. Thank you to Captain Sims for welcoming us and getting us started on this hallowed day. 23 years ago this morning, America's entered into a new world, one profoundly changed by a heinous, cowardly act of terrorism on our own soil. That morning, teams of terrorists driven by an ideology of hatred hijacked commercial jetliners filled with innocent people, innocent passengers. Turning the planes into deadly missiles, they struck the World Trade Center towers in New York City and the Pentagon in our nation's capital. A fourth hijacked jet never reached its target, most likely our U.S. Capitol building in Washington, D.C., instead crashing into a Pennsylvania farm field after passengers heroically fought for all of us. In a matter of just hours, 3,000 people, 3,000 children of God were killed. It remains the deadliest attack on U.S. soil in our nation's 248-year history. One reason that we're here today is to remember and to pay our respects to the terrible toll that that day took on your brothers and sisters in fire protection services. We remember the heroes running without hesitation into the scariest scene that any of us had ever seen, running into a collapsing building thinking they could just maybe save one more precious life. September 11th's devastating toll included 343 firefighters and paramedics. It was and remains the deadliest single day in U.S. fire service history. Every year since September 11th, 2001, Americans have gathered at commemorations just like this. For those of us who lived through that historic day, and the many hard months and years that followed, the pain remains raw and the losses are still heartbreaking. For thousands of our fellow Americans, these losses are deeply personal and deeply painful. The depths of anger and grief for those that lost parents, spouses, or children is sorrow beyond many of our understanding. I lost a friend and former classmate that day. His name was Ted Adderley Jr. In September 2001, Ted was working at his first professional job. He was about 4 months out of college. He was a financial advisor on the 93rd floor of the World Trade Center's North Tower, the very first spot that was hit. Today, Brittany and I are thinking about Ted and his family that still grieves for him. Last year, I got the chance to visit the 9/11 Memorial Museum and hear Ted's voice once again. I think each year about the blessings that I've had and whether they're the successes or the difficulties of that year. Ted remains 22 forever, while I had the opportunity to meet my wife, to bring children into this world, to try to make my mark on this commonwealth, on my home, on the people around me. And that was robbed of Ted and so many other people on that day. So we gather to remember the victims of that heinous act, but also their families and their friends who still grieve today. This is the 23rd anniversary of the 2001 attack. For an increasing number of Americans, including many of our newest fire protection recruits, this is a purely historical event. I remember when my children got their first assignment based on 9/11, it was in their history class, when it's part of the life that many of us have led, a day that we all remember, a day that will never leave us. So we also gather to help the next generation of Americans understand the losses and the lessons of that day, so it doesn't have to be repeated. And if we do our job in impressing what happened that day, both the loss and the heroism, then hopefully our country never has to go through something like that again, and our families never suffer from that type of loss. Today, flags at all Kentucky State office buildings are lowered at half-staff as part of our commemoration for those that we lost. We remember the uniformed military, the office workers, the airline personnel, the law enforcement, emergency crews, and of course the firefighters, all children of God taken far too soon. But today is also Patriot Day, to make sure that we recognize those who courageously love and defend our country, who make sure we don't go through another 9/11. That's one of the reasons I've chosen to be here with you on this hallowed day once again. The firefighters who perished on 9/11 were men and women who took the same oath of service as so many of you that are here today. Your courage and your selflessness separates you from most of the rest of us. And for those heroes on 9/11, it meant paying the ultimate sacrifice. That is heroism and love of country in its purest form. And it's important that we remember that sacrifice, but also that example. Because while terrorists' cowardly act may have succeeded in creating a spectacle of destruction, their overall goal was dividing us, and that failed miserably. Americans did not fold. Instead, we came together to confront this threat and to rebuild together. The heroes of that day showed us that while hatred and evil might rule a single day, they hold no power over Americans' love of country and our love of each other, our fellow citizens. These are the lessons we must remember and teach to the next generation of Americans. It is our duty to remember those lost, as well as the acts of unimaginable heroism and sacrifice. In the wake of September 11th, our families, our entire nation was forever changed. It was a turning point in our history. And instead of letting this attack divide us, we came together and we fought back. And our brave military heroes stepped up to defend our freedoms. America is home of the free because of the brave, and we should be forever grateful. Today we show love for those lost and our support for those that are grieving, especially on this tough day. Scripture guides us, hate stirs up conflict, but love covers all wrongs. Let us recommit ourselves to being worthy of the lives lost and the sacrifices made on 9/11. If we didn't let that day and its destruction divide us, let's not let anything else pull us apart. It was a day that reminded us that no matter our beliefs, we are not each other's enemies. We are each other's neighbors. We are each other's fellow Americans. 9/11 reminded us that we are Americans first and foremost, and that we stand with each other. This country is and will always remain a beacon of light to the rest of the world, as long as we recognize our neighbor is one of us, someone we care about, someone that we love, someone we want to do well, and we want their kids to do well. So let us continue to show our children and the next generation who we are, what it means to be Americans, and how we stand up to those that would pull us apart. So thank you. God bless all our heroes that are here today. God bless our nation. God bless our Commonwealth. I'll now turn it over to the Mayor of Louisville, Craig Greenberg.
Thank you so much, Governor, for those poignant and powerful remarks. And thanks so much to members of my administration, LMPD, Louisville Fire, St. Matthews Fire, other first responders, and members of the community for joining us here this morning. To the men and women of Louisville Fire and all of our first responders, one of the great privileges of serving as mayor is to serve alongside each of you, to call you colleagues in our service to Louisville. I've gotten to see you all in action so many times, and I'm always impressed and always grateful. I grew up being impressed and grateful by the work of firefighters. In fact, my grandfather was a firefighter in New York City. This is his fire helmet that is one of my family's most cherished possessions that I keep in my office. He was a firefighter with FDNY, Engine Company 207 in Brooklyn. And when I was young, I used to try to get my grandfather to tell me stories about his experiences when he was a firefighter. And he was reluctant to talk about it too much, but when he did, I loved hearing about the fires that he had fought, the service that he had performed, and I grew up with an incredible admiration for firefighters all around us. And I think about my grandfather every time I see our firefighters go into action. Whether it's our outstanding team of firefighters here in Louisville or any group of firefighters at any time, anywhere. And I always think of my grandfather on September 11th. And that's because even though my grandfather had retired decades before 2001, Engine 207 was on the scene at the World Trade Center that day. As retired FDNY firefighter Paul Hyland shared some of his memories with New York Magazine, he reflected, quote, "Engine 207 from our firehouse, I was talking to them in the lobby, and then I believe they went into the World Trade Center Marriott. None of them were ever found, not even a tool. If God had a plan, I don't know what it was," end quote. Paul Hyland went on to say that he took a piece of broken glass from one of the windows of the World Trade Center, and he keeps it above his desk as a way of remembering that day and honoring all of the good people who we lost that day. It's difficult for any one of us to find comfort in a day as dark as September 11th. But the light shines through in the response of the people who showed up to help that day, who put the safety of others ahead of their own. That's what first responders do, and that's extraordinary. And we should always remember and appreciate how extraordinary and meaningful and powerful that service is. Whether we're talking about a historic moment like 9/11 or other moments of crisis when people are in danger anywhere, including right here. Whether it's an apartment building fire in Phoenix Hill, a business burning in Shively, or a semi-truck and a driver hanging off of the 2nd Street Bridge. You all show up. You help. And I'm so grateful that since September 11, 2001, we have not had another crisis of that magnitude in our country or in our city. But we've had enough emergency situations for me to feel confidence and gratitude, because whenever any size emergency happens, I know that every firefighter, I know that every police officer, I know that every EMT, I know that every first responder in our city is trained and is ready, just like the first responders in New York on 9/11. You all show up to work every day not knowing what will be asked of you, but prepared to do whatever you can, whatever it will take to save lives and serve others. And not only do you save people, you inspire each of us too. We saw that after 9/11. Stories of the heroic sacrifices of first responders on that day helped inspire people across the country to donate blood and money and time, because we wanted to help also. And that serves as another reminder, another piece of the legacy of 9/11 that we should remember in times of crisis or in times of tragedy. The first response belongs to you. What comes next is on all of us. We have a role and a responsibility in moments of crisis as well, whether it's an act of terror or an act of violence, an accident, or a natural disaster. Whatever it is, once our first responders have done their amazing work, governments, nonprofits, the private sectors, and individual citizens, we all have a duty to step up. And often we see that, but it bears repeating, that it's on all of us to provide support for survivors and families of those who we have lost. And it's on all of us to look for ways to prevent or anticipate future crises. And it's on us to show our gratitude in ways that are tangible as well as ceremonial, like investing in higher salaries and better equipment, training, facilities, and support services for all of our first responders. Each of you make an incredible commitment to us, to our city, to our state, to our country. And we need to make a commitment to you as well. And my commitment to you as mayor is to continue to support our first responders. We will honor the service and sacrifice of firefighters and first responders from September 11th and from every day by working together and by supporting the professionals we count on to be there for us today, tomorrow, and always. Rachel and I and all of Louisville Metro government thank each and every one of you for your dedicated public service. God bless our country. God bless our Commonwealth. God bless our great city of Louisville. Thank you all very much. It is now my great privilege to introduce the Chief of Louisville Fire Department, Brian O'Neill.
Good morning and welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming out this morning and joining us. What a privilege it is to have our governor and our mayor here with us today. Many thanks to them. Thank you to Chief Humphrey. Many thanks to our local union officials. But I want to give a special thanks today to Chief Nick Clark. Chief Clark is the chief of the St. Matthews Fire Department, and he's here today to represent the suburban fire departments. And what we want to show is that there really is no suburban and urban divide. Our first alarms might look a little bit different, high rises, businesses, whatever, but we do essentially the same job. And the men and women that answer the calling to do that job are essentially the same. We're cut from the same cloth. And that's not just true here, it's also true with the Arlington County Fire Department that responded to the Pentagon. That's true with the FDNY in New York. You see, we're not here today at fire headquarters to try to borrow someone else's tragedy, somebody else's grief, the 343 firefighters that answered the last alarm that day. We mourned that day along with our brothers and sisters because their loss is our loss. And we remember today, along with our brothers and sisters, that loss. We also remember the 360 firefighters who have died since that day from 9/11 related cancers and illnesses. And it's not just us. It's our brothers and sisters in blue. 72 law enforcement officers were killed that day. And to this day, nearly 300 law enforcement officers who have died from 9/11 related cancers and illnesses because of the work that they put in afterwards. It's the rest of America that lost almost 3,000 people that day. And it goes beyond our shores. The Statue of Liberty says it right there, that we are a beacon of worldwide welcome. Over 102 countries lost citizens that day in New York City, in Virginia, and in Pennsylvania. And it's important that we don't just focus on that loss. While that was the greatest loss, as the governor pointed out, not only the greatest terrorist attack, the biggest loss to the United States Fire Service or any fire service, but that was the largest, most successful rescue mission in the history of the fire service. Thousands of lives that were saved because of the efforts of the firefighters and the police officers to evacuate as many as they could from those towers before they fell. That's what we need to remember. We gather and remember the victims of that day, but we can't just focus on the fact that they were killed. We have to think about who they were, the lives that they led, the people who were fortunate enough to know them and to love them. That's what we need to remember. I'm going to give you a little bit of homework because I am a nerdy guy. Please listen to these names and just pick one of them and look them up today. I'm not going to give you the information. I want you to go and seek it out. Rodney Dickens, Jose Guadalupe, Sandy Bradshaw, Robert Fazio, Albert Joseph Amelia Fields. Look them up, Google them, learn their names, learn their stories, who they were. Not just that they were there that day, but what brought them there that day and who they were. You see, if you look them up, probably the first thing that you're going to see is the most insignificant two facts about a person's life. The day they were born, the day that they die. Those facts are not important to an individual. I don't remember the day I was born, and once I'm gone, I'm not going to remember my death. They're important to others. It's who they were, it's the living. It's not that they died or how they died, but it's that they lived and how they lived. And it's not even that individual death, that moment that we lost, just like the governor mentioned. It's the future that was stolen. That is why we mourn. So if you want to do something positive today, and I beseech you, please do, be kind to everyone that you see, even if you think they don't deserve it. And I'll tell you what, especially if you think they don't deserve it, because they probably need it the most. Think about September 12th, 2001. The way that we came together as a nation, the way that we looked out for one another, that's how we honor their memory. You see that her blinker's on, let her in. What's the big deal? You're gonna be 2 seconds later? Open the door for everyone. Pick up the phone and call that friend or family member that you have not spoken with for far too long. Because tomorrow is promised to no one. We have no idea what tomorrow might hold, but we do have right now. Don't waste it. Sorry, I was supposed to finish. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our ceremony. Thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it. Once again, we thank Mercer. It's a trucking company. It's located right behind our headquarters here that has this piece of World Trade Center steel. We welcome you to hang around, to talk with the police and firefighters.